اگر ہم دیکھ لیں کہ کس طرح سے صرف ایلیٹ جو ہے وہ پولیٹیشین نہیں ہے، باقی اس کے علاوہ اور بھی لوگ ہیں جو ہمارے ایگریکلچر سیکٹر کو بھی وہی دیکھتے ہیں، سبسیڈریز بھی ان کو جاتے
بس
ہیں،
ٹھیک.
باقی بزنس بھی وہ کس طرح سے امپیکٹ کر رہے ہیں باقی.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Fatma Afzal from Fatma University. I wanted to ask that in several sessions, the suggestions that have been given, it is the role of local government. So how do you think we can bring the role of local government or at the forefront? Thank you.
میرا جلدی سے میڈیا سے یہ سوال ہے کہ یہ سارا کچھ کیپچر جو ہے نا لیک آف انفارمیشن پہ چلتا ہے. تو جو آپ لوگوں سے میری یہ درخواست ہے کہ ایک سلوشن یہ بھی ہے کہ پبلک کو ایشوز سمجھائیں تھریڈ بیئر آبجیکٹیولی، بجائے اس کے کہ وہ جو ایک ٹاک شوز میں جو روز پالیٹ پہ تنگ کرتے ہیں. میں نے تو ٹی وی دیکھنا چھوڑ دیا. بالکل ٹھیک کہہ رہے ہیں. ہاں جی بس جی میرا خیال ہے ہو گئے. تھینک یو. چلیں جی ان کو دے دیں جلدی سے مائک. یہ پیچھے بیٹھے ہوئے ایک صاحب، یہ پیچھے یہ بیٹھے بھائی، ان کو دے دیں جلدی سے دے دیں. چلیں جی چلیں. اب اچھا سا سوال پوچھیں. اتنی محنت کی آپ کو مائک دینے میں، پرانا سوال نہ پوچھیں.
گلزیب فرام پائٹ، کیا آئین پاکستان کا فیل ہونا ایلیٹ کیپچر کا باعث بنا؟
گڈ کوشچن. کون پہلے بولے گا؟
I'll take the two legal questions. One was by the girl back there. آپ نے پوچھا کہ لوکل گورنمنٹ کو فور فرنٹ پہ لانے کا لیگل کانسٹیٹیوشنل فریم ورک کیا ہے. حبیب اکرم صاحب نے ابھی اس کے بارے میں تھوڑا سا ہنٹ کیا، میں اس کو کنٹیکسچلائز کر دیتا ہوں. آئین پاکستان کے اندر لوکل گورنمنٹ کا تذکرہ ہی نہیں تھا 2010 سے پہلے، کوئی تذکرہ نہیں تھا. وی ور سائلنٹ. اس سے پہلے جتنے لوکل گورنمنٹ کے لوکل گورنمنٹس آئیں 70s کے اندر، اس کے بعد وہ مختلف سسٹمز کے نیچے آئیں. ان کی کانسٹیٹیوشنل پلگ جو ہے وہ ایکسپریس نہیں تھا. 2010 کے اندر 18ویں ترمیم میں آئین پاکستان کے اندر آرٹیکل 140 الف 140A انٹروڈیوس کروایا گیا. وہ آرٹیکل یہ کہتا ہے کہ ہر صوبائی حکومت کی، پروونشل اسمبلی کی رسپانسبلٹی ہوگی کہ وہ تین چیزیں پولیٹیکل، فائنینشیل اینڈ ایڈمنسٹریٹو پاور کو ڈیوالو کرے لوکل گورنمنٹ تک تھرو اے لا. So Article 140A says, it shall be the responsibility of the provinces to devolve political, administrative and financial power through law to the local government. That's all that exists in the constitution now. اس آئین کی پروویژن کے تابع رہتے ہوئے صوبوں کے اوپر رسپانسبلٹی لگا دی گئی کہ آپ اپنے اپنے لوکل گورنمنٹ کے قوانین بنائیں جن کے نیچے لوکل گورنمنٹ کا سسٹم بنے گا. کے پی نے اپنا بنایا، پنجاب نے اپنا بنایا، سندھ نے اپنا بنایا. لیکن کیونکہ اس کے اندر کوئی ٹائم لائن اسٹیپولیٹڈ نہیں ہے، کیونکہ اس کے اندر کوئی کانسیکوینس اسٹیپولیٹڈ نہیں ہے کہ اگر صوبہ نہیں کرے گا تو کیا ہوگا، تو جب متعلقہ صوبوں نے، پنجاب نے اپنا قانون ریپیل کر دیا، سندھ نے اپنا کر دیا، بعد میں اینڈ میں کے پی نے اپنا کر دیا، تو عدالتوں میں کیسز فائل ہوئے تو عدالتوں نے صرف یہ کہا کہ نہیں آپ کو کرنا چاہیے. لیکن کیونکہ نہیں کر رہے تو کانسیکوینس کوئی نہیں ہے آئین میں لکھا ہوا، کسی کو سزا نہیں ملی، کوئی اس میں NFC کا اوارڈ ختم نہیں ہوا، کوئی اس کا کانسیکوینس نہیں ہوا، یا اس کی کوئی ٹائم لائن اسٹیپولیٹڈ نہیں تھی آئین کے اندر. اس وجہ سے آج بھی آئین میں انکمبنٹ ہے کہ لوکل گورنمنٹس ہونی چاہیے، ہماری کسی صوبے میں لوکل گورنمنٹ نہیں ہے. تو حبیب اکرم صاحب نے یہ بات کی کہ بھارت کی طرح ہمیں آئین کے اندر ہی لکھ دینا چاہیے کہ یہ 5 سال بعد الیکشن ہوگا، الیکشن کمیشن کرائے گا، فلاں ڈیٹ پہ تاریخ دی جائے گی، اس طرح ڈیلیمیٹیشنز ہوں گی تاکہ صوبوں کے اندر جو ریلیونٹ پولیٹیکل پارٹیز ہیں وہ اس کو ڈیفنکٹ نہ کر سکیں. دیٹس دا سولوشن ٹو یور کوشچن کہ لوکل گورنمنٹ کو کیسے آگے لایا جائے گا. vis-a-vis the collapse of the constitution, may I say کہ the collapse of the constitution is not because of the constitutional fabric being wrong. ہمارے آئین میں کوئی ایسی ایک دو چیزوں کے علاوہ جو ضیاء الحق صاحب نے انٹروڈیوس کروائی، کوئی ایسی چیز نہیں ہے جو دنیا کے دیگر آئین سے مختلف ہو. ہم نے پارلیمنٹری فارم آف گورنمنٹ ब्रिटेन से इनहेरिट किया। ब्रिटेन कॉमनवेल्थ कंट्री सारों के अंदर चलता है, दुनिया के अंदर तकरीबन 120 ममालिक हैं जिसमें रिप्रेजेंटेटिव डेमोक्रेसी है, पार्लियामेंट्री फॉर्म ऑफ गवर्नमेंट है। हमारे पास आइन के अंदर इलेक्शन कमीशन है, दुनिया के तमाम आइन के अंदर इलेक्शन कमीशन है। हमारे पास आइन के अंदर अफवाज पाकिस्तान है, दुनिया के आइन के अंदर उनकी अफवाज है। हमारे आइन के अंदर एग्जीक्यूटिव है, जुडिशरी है। स्ट्रक्चर हमारा आइन के फेलियर का रिस्पॉन्सिबल नहीं है। आइन के फेलियर की कुछ और रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटीज़ हैं, उसमें से कुछ सियासतदानों की होंगी, कुछ इदारों की होंगी, कुछ अदालतों की होंगी, उस पर हम बहस कर सकते हैं। बट इसका सोल्यूशन ये नहीं है कि आइन को अंडू कर दिया जाए।
जी नसीम दीदी।
साबरा ने जो भी सवाल किया एलीट कैप्चर, आई थिंक ये मुख्तलिफ हमने टर्म्स इस्तेमाल किए। एलीट इज़ एलीट, आई मीन जब आप लफ्ज़ कैप्चर करें, एसेंशली जो हम समझे थे वो ये था कि हम इस पर बात कर रहे हैं कि जो स्टेट की रिसोर्सेज हैं किस तरीके से माशरे में एक एलीट जो इन्फ्लुएंशियल एलीट होती है वो कैप्चर कर लेती है, और फिर वो जो रिसोर्सेज हैं वो आम शहरियों के फ़ायदे की बजाय वो एक स्पेसिफिक जो ग्रुप होता है, चाहे वो बिज़नेस का हो, चाहे वो रियल एस्टेट टाइकून हो, चाहे कुछ हो, उनको फ़ायदा मिलता है। वो हमारे पाकिस्तान में उसकी बड़ी एग्जांपल्स हैं। आप भी फरमा रहे थे कि एलीट बार्गेन भी होता है। देखिए मुल्क साउथ कोरिया में भी एक एलीट बनी, लेकिन उनको बड़े स्पेसिफिक ऑब्जेक्टिव्स दिए स्टेट ने कि आपने ये एक्सपोर्ट भी बढ़ानी है, ये भी करना है। हमें लगता है जो पाकिस्तान में एलीट कैप्चर हुआ है उसमें फ़ायदा उन्हीं का हुआ है जिनको ये स्पेशल कंसेशंस मिले हैं। और मतलब वो लंबी डिबेट है, बट यू कैन सी द लेवल्स ऑफ एफिशिएंसी, हाउ कंपेटिटिव आर यू। आपने ओवर प्राइसिंग की, ओवर लाइसेंस स्पेसिफिक को दिए, इनको दिए, आपका NDFC ख़त्म हो गया, आपका IDBP ख़त्म हो गया, आपका PK ख़त्म हो गया, और आपने जब भुट्टो को ख़त्म करना था तो आपने एक पंजाब की एलीट बनाई, उसको आपने क्या क्या नहीं दिया। मेरा मतलब ये तो our story is so deeply linked to the power game in this country and continues to be linked. इस वजह से मेरा ख्याल है कि हम जैसे साउथ कोरिया में अगर होता ना, यहाँ भी आप कहते हैं जी अच्छा इतना आपको मिलता है, कंसेशन मिलता है, बट यू परफॉर्म एट दिस लेवल, वी डोंट सी दैट इन दिस कंट्री। और आप मेरा ख्याल है कि एक बाकी तो सवाल इन्होंने कर लिए, जवाब दे दिए दो तीन के अहम के। एक आप किसी ने कहा था पावर वर्सेस एलीट। जी अच्छा, पावर एलीट नहीं, पावर एंड एलीट आर नॉट सिनोनिमस। पावर जो इन प्रैक्टिस, और हम पाकिस्तान के हवाले से बात करें, पावर तो उसके पास है जो एलीट को कैप्चर करने देता है स्टेट रिसोर्सेज। फिर वो मतलब आप उसको ऑल्टरनेट भी कर सकते हैं, लेकिन असल में द वंस हु कॉल द शॉट्स आर द वंस हु हैव द पावर एट एनी गिवन पॉइंट, वेदर इट्स द खाकी और वेदर इट्स द पॉलिटिशियन। और उससे फिर लीड बनती है जो वापस आ जाती है पावर गेम में भी। तो यानी कि इतना सेपरेट नहीं है, इट्स देयर इज़ अ लॉट ऑफ ओवरलैप। इस पे जो एलीट लोकल गवर्नमेंट पे 100% व्हाट हबीब इज सेइंग मेक सेंस, क्योंकि हर पॉलिटिकल पार्टी ने बाद में कोशिश की टू बैक ऑफ फ्रॉम डेवोल्यूशन ऑफ पावर है ना। आप लोकल गवर्नमेंट देते हैं, इसका मतलब कि फिर आप उस लेवल पे अपनी पावर आपने आगे देनी है। तो पॉलिटिशियन ने प्रोविंशियल लेवल, 18th अमेंडमेंट में क्या हुआ, प्रोविंस के बाद आप आगे गए नहीं। फाइनली लैक ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन, बिल्कुल ठीक आप कह रहे हैं। जो मीडिया का रोल बन गया, और उसमें कुछ हालात भी, कुछ हमारी भी जिम्मेदारी है। मीडिया तो इसने ये कहा, उसने ये कहा, उसने इसको मारा, इससे मतलब पॉलिसी जो सब्सटैंटिव डिस्कशंस हैं, और इन्फॉर्मेशन किसी हद तक दे भी देते हैं। देखिए बहुत सी इन्फॉर्मेशन दे देते हैं, लेकिन इन्फोर्समेंट का, जिस तरह नदीम कह रहे थे कल प्रोग्राम हुआ इस पर कि इन्फोर्समेंट क्यों नहीं होती। फिर आपकी रेगुलेटरी अथॉरिटीज़ जो हैं, दे आर मतलब हाउ इफेक्टिव आर दे, इतना बड़े सवाल हैं। CDA को देखिएगा, CDA कभी कुछ गिरता है फिर बनता है, फिर गिरता है बनता है, और सब बुरा भला कहा जाता है उनको जो बना रहे हैं। व्हाट इज CDA डूइंग? तो यही चीज़ को आप ले जाएं और मामलात पे कि इंफॉर्मेशन होगी भी, लेकिन रेगुलेटरी बॉडीज़ के पास कितनी अथॉरिटी है, वो पूरा एक और ही मामला है। थैंक यू जी।
یہ حبیب صاحب بفور آئی گیو یو دا فلور ایک چھوٹی سی چیز کی ہم اکنالجمنٹ کر دیں. ہماری فوج آ گئی ہے بچوں کی. یہ سویٹ ہومز کے بچے ہیں ماشاءاللہ, بڑی ڈسپلن سے آتے ہیں اور انہوں نے کل ہمارے ساتھ پارٹیسپیٹ بھی کیا. سویٹ ہومز کے بچے ہیں, انہوں نے کل ہمارے ساتھ پارٹیسپیٹ بھی کیا تھا, اپنی کہانی بھی سنائی تھی اور ماشاءاللہ بڑے ڈسپلن ہیں, بڑے غور سے سنتے ہیں. تو میں ان کے لیے چاہتا تھا پہلے ہم تالی بجا دیں اور پھر حبیب صاحب اوور ٹو یو. مجھے ایک بات بتائیے, یہ 7 سال کی بڑی وہ فیتھ ہے, ہی از اے لائر, لا میں بڑا فیتھ ہے. میں ذرا تھوڑا پیچھے ہٹ جاتا ہوں لا سے, بیکاز ایک میرا استاد تھا جو اب استانی بن گئی ہے, دیٹس اے ڈفرنٹ بال گیم, اور اس نے بڑی اچھی کتاب لکھی, وہ کہتی ہے الٹیمیٹلی اٹس آل ویلیوز. ہمارے پاس ویلیوز کیا ہے؟ برطانیہ میں تو ایک وزیر اعظم, اس نے ایک پارٹی کی تھی, اس کو اترنا پڑا. دوسرا وزیر اعظم ریفرینڈم ہار گیا, اس کو اترنا پڑا. ان میں غیرت ہے, ہمارے میں غیرت ہے, ہم اتریں گے کبھی, ہمارے میں غیرت ہے. وہ پرائم منسٹر بنتے ہیں دوبارہ واپس نہیں آتے, ہمارے پرائم منسٹر دوبارہ واپس آ کے بیٹھ جاتے ہیں اسمبلی میں. تو یہ غیرت کا کانسیپٹ لے کر ذرا تھوڑا سا.
قانون دراصل جب ویلیوز ختم ہوتی ہیں تو اس جگہ کو, اس خلا کو جو چیز پر کرتی ہے وہ قانون. اصول ویلیوز ہیں اور اصول عہد کا فہم ہے اور عہد کے اندر پائی جانے والی اخلاقیات ہیں. قانون ان کو انفورس کرنے کا نام ہے. اور اگر ویلیوز نہ ہوں تو ساتھ ڈائسی نے کہا تھا غالباً کہ یہ قانون ایک ایسا ڈھانچہ ہے جس کو دیکھ کے ڈر آئے گا آپ کو. گوشت پوست اور اس کا حسن جو ہے وہ ویلیوز ہیں, اور پاکستان میں ہمیں ڈھانچہ ہی کڑکڑاتا ہوا نظر آتا رہتا ہے, ویلیوز کہیں نظر نہیں آتی. ویلیوز کی امپورٹنس پاکستان میں پتہ نہیں کب آئے گی. جو ایلیٹ کیپچر کی ٹرم ہے, بڑے اس پہ ذکر ہوا ہے, تو میں اس پہ تھوڑا سا ایک واضح کرنا چاہوں گا کہ میرا خیال ہے کہ ایلیٹ کیپچر فی نفسی ہی ایک دوسرے سے متصادم ہے. یعنی یہ اصطلاح ہی متباین ہے کہ اس کا کیپچر اور ایلیٹ ایک دوسرے سے ملتا نہیں. ایلیٹ وہ لوگ نہیں ہیں جو کیپچر کرتے ہیں. میرا خیال یہ ہے کہ ایلیٹ وہ لوگ نہیں ہیں جو کیپچر کرتے ہیں. جو کیپچر کرتے ہیں وہ نوسر باز کرتے ہیں. ایلیٹ قانون شکن نہیں ہوتی, قانون کی محافظ ہوتی ہے. قانون شکن جو ہے وہ نوسر باز ہوتا ہے, جو فراڈ کرتا ہے اور خود کو وہ اپنے اوپر ایلیٹ کی چادر اوڑھ لیتا ہے, ایلیٹ کا ماسک لگا لیتا ہے. وہ ایک بہروپیہ ہوتا ہے جو دراصل جرائم پیشہ ہوتا ہے, لیکن وہ خود آ کے اپنی گاڑی کے زور پہ, اپنے اچھے فرنیچر کے زور پہ, اپنے بڑے گھر کے زور پہ, اور بعض اوقات اپنے بچوں کی تعلیم کے زور پہ وہ اس ایلیٹ میں گھسنے کی کوشش کرتا ہے. تو لہٰذا ایلیٹ کیپچر کی بجائے میرا خیال ہے کہ کوئی اور ٹرم اس میں بہتر ہونی چاہیے. دوسری بات کہ پاور میں اور ایلیٹ میں کیا فرق ہے. دیکھیے, ایلیٹ کا مطلب پاور نہیں ہے, جیسے ابھی نسیم نے کہا, ایلیٹ کا مطلب پاور نہیں ہے اور پاورفل لوگوں کا مطلب ایلیٹ نہیں ہے. بہت سارے لوگ ایسے ہیں جو ایلیٹ میں تو ہوتے ہیں دنیا کی نارمل سوسائٹی میں, ہماری سوسائٹی میں ایسا نہیں ہے انفارچونیٹلی. کچھ عرصہ پہلے تک تھا, اب ایسا نہیں ہے. اب ایلیٹ میں وہ لوگ, پاکستان میں وہ لوگ شامل ہوتے ہیں جو دراصل قانون شکن ہیں اور اپنی قانون شکنی کو تحفظ دینے کے لیے انہیں طاقت کی ضرورت ہر وقت رہتی ہے. آپ ذرا دیکھ لیجئے, آپ کہیں بھی کسی بھی خوشحال اپنے جو ارد گرد کے لوگ ہیں, وہ خوشحال جنہیں ہم سو کالڈ ایلیٹ کہہ سکتے ہیں, انہوں نے کیا کیا ہوا ہے. انہوں نے ایک پولیس والے سے دوستی بنائی ہوئی ہے, اعلیٰ پولیس والے سے دوستی بنائی ہے. انہوں نے کسی ایک اعلیٰ افسر سے دوستی بنائی ہوئی ہے. اچھا, کچھ کیسز میں انہوں نے وکیلوں سے دوستی بنائی ہوئی ہے, اور آج کل رواج یہ چل نکلا ہے کہ ٹی وی چینل ہی کھول لو. مطلب کام یہاں تک پہنچ گئے وہ, اور ہم ان کی نوکری کرتے ہیں. دیکھیے, بات یہ ہے کہ یہاں پہ تو آوے کا آوا بگڑ چکا ہے. دوسری بات ہے کہ لاسٹ ہی میں عرض کروں گا کہ آپ نے کہا تھا کہ ایشوز کو سمجھائیں. دیکھیے, یہ بڑا آسان بات ہے کہ آپ کہہ دیں کہ ایشوز کو سمجھائیں. ایک مجھے بتائیے کہ معیشت جو ہے, معیشت تو اپنی کم ترین شکل میں قبرستان میں بھی جاری رہتی ہے. جنگ زدہ علاقوں میں بھی معیشت چل رہی ہوتی ہے. آپ کا کیا جاتا ہے, آپ کا ریاستی نظم ٹوٹ جاتا ہے. آپ کا جو اسٹیٹ ڈسپلن ہے جب وہ ختم ہو جائے تو اس کے بعد باقی چیزوں کا ہونا یا نہ ہونا اس سے فرق نہیں پڑتا. ہمارا معاملہ یہ ہے کہ ہمارا اسٹیٹ ڈسپلن ختم ہوتا چلا جا رہا ہے.
हमारे सदर ने चीफ इलेक्शन कमिश्नर को बुलाया, उसने कहा मैं नहीं आता। क्या पाकिस्तान में ये तसव्वुर इससे पहले था? यहां पर बड़े बड़े ओहदेदारों को बरसरे मजलिस, बरसरे इजलास जिस तरह का उनके साथ सलूक हुआ है, जिसका हमें कुछ पता भी है, लेकिन यहाँ पर हौसला भी साथ छोड़ जाता है और ताब भी नहीं ला सकता कहने की। जिस तौहीन आमेज अंदाज से हम अपने लोगों को, बड़े लोगों को डील और ट्रीट कर रहे हैं, क्या हमारा रियासती नज़म बाकी है? हमारे रियासती नज़म को ख़तरा है जिसके साथ सारे इशूज जुड़े हुए हैं। अगर ये खुदा न खास्ता अगर आपका इशू, ये आपका मसला हल ना हो सका, तो फिर मईशत क्या, समाज क्या, ये सब कुछ, ये सारा तारो पौ ताना बाना जो है वो बिखर जाएगा।
बहुत शुक्रिया जी, थैंक यू वेरी मच, वी वर लवली पैनल। इसका सिर्फ एक नुकसान हुआ है कि खाने का वक्त कम हो गया है, तो मेरा ख्याल है आज रोज़ा ही रखें बेहतर है, क्योंकि सिर्फ 25 मिनट में दूसरी सेशन शुरू हो जाएगी। तो जिसमें इतना तकवा नहीं, रोज़ा नहीं रख सकता, तो वो जाके खा ले, वरना इल्म की भूख की काफ़ी है, यहाँ बैठे रहें। थैंक यू।
Thank you so much. We have some small souvenir for our panelists as a token of thanks. Before we go for a break, I
a lot of different stakeholders to sort of talk about the important reforms needed to bring Pakistan on a growth path and back to sound economic growth and achieving its development priorities. So as part of this, the World Bank produced 8 policy notes in many different areas. And we took these policy notes on a roadshow, essentially. So we tried to engage with a lot of different stakeholders, policymakers, but also beyond. And the attempt is that all the feedback that we receive as part of this outreach program will feed into revising these policy notes, and we will then present them to the incoming government. As part of the outreach program, we had a social media campaign. We also engaged with traditional media outlets. We engaged with thought leaders throughout the whole country. We had provincial roundtable discussions where we tried to gather feedback from important stakeholders in the fields related to the various areas of policy reforms. We also engaged with youth, which was particularly rewarding for us. We held focus group discussions and engagement programs across 21 universities all over Pakistan and engaged with more than 500 youth. One of them is actually sitting on our panel today. And we, of course, also held discussions with the international community. But very briefly, and I'm just stepping over here so I can actually see the slides. So what is Reforms for a Brighter Future? So we see several challenges, and Reforms for a Brighter Future is meant to support initiatives to overcome some of these challenges. So Pakistan is amid a human and economic development crisis. We see that the current economic model no longer reduces poverty. We also see that living standards have fallen behind some of the peers, particularly in the South Asia region. And we also see that we have strong challenges with human development outcomes. And climate change, of course, represents a very stark challenge, most recently, of course, experienced during last year's floods. Economic and development progress is possible. So we don't just want to paint a gloomy picture. We are strong believers that with sound policies going forward, progress can be made. There is potential for much faster growth, and we also see that other countries who have been in situations of crises have used these crises to successfully go back onto a growth path. And this is why we put on this program, is essentially to say, even though the economic situation may not look particularly rosy right now, there is a way forward. And to make this way forward, fundamental shifts are necessary. And these fundamental shifts are related to the different policy notes that we are proposing. And we are focusing on essentially 5 areas. That's addressing the human capital crisis, achieving fiscal sustainability, transforming the private sector, achieving sustainable energy, and unleashing the agri-food sector. And just a few more details on where we're coming from. So essentially, the economic model no longer produces the same development outcomes or the same poverty reduction that Pakistan has seen in the past. So we see very volatile growth, and we see sort of a downward trend in poverty between 2001 and 2018. But in the last few years, we've actually, based on estimates, we've actually seen an increase in poverty. And this, of course, is very concerning for all of us caring about development progress in the country. We also see not only that poverty has gone in a direction that we'd rather change, but also that Pakistan has fallen behind other countries in the region. And so what we see, for example, that though the real GDP per capita has grown over time since the 70s, we also see that other countries are growing at a much faster pace. And these other countries are kind of aspirational peers that have managed to really use growth as a mechanism for poverty reduction. We also see that these growth rates have persistently lagged behind countries that we can compare to. These are countries in the region, but also aspirational peers, as I mentioned, and also it lags behind kind of its income group. And so all of this leads us to believe that a shift is necessary, and this shift needs to happen now. So it's time to decide what development path Pakistan is going on. And so this is possible, and we have done quite a lot of research to show how one can get out of, or how Pakistan can get on a growth path that will reduce poverty again. And these areas are really, I won't go through all the reform areas, but these are related to the 5 pillars. So in addressing the human capital crisis, we want to move from an underfunded, inefficient service delivery and social protection system that's currently quite fragmented and accountabilities that spread over different actors, towards a coordinated, efficient and adequately financed service delivery that targets the most vulnerable. Under achieving fiscal sustainability, we want to achieve moving from a wasteful and rigid expenditure financed by high levels of debt and a very narrow, distortive and inequitable tax system towards prioritized investments that support growth and development financed by a broad-based, efficient and a more equitable tax system. And under each of these pillars, we have several reforms that we are proposing as part of our policy notes. Transforming the private sector, here the focus is really to move from heavily regulated, protected, stagnant and unproductive economy with a large state presence towards a dynamic, open economy driven by private investments and exports. And this is sort of a nice lead on also from the previous session. Under unleashing the agri-food sector, we're hoping to move from an agriculture sector and a policy setting in the agriculture sector that locks farmers into low-value, low-productivity farming activities towards a market-driven agricultural system that's strongly supported by public interventions, but that are specifically focused on building resilience and improving productivity. And last but not least, under achieving sustainable energy, the reforms that we are proposing aim at moving from an energy sector policy settings that are driven by high energy costs, that are environmentally harmful and unsustainable in terms of debt accumulation, towards an efficient, sustainable and resilient energy sector based on accurate price signals to strengthen private sector participation. So this is in a nutshell the reforms for a brighter future agenda. And I would now like to just briefly tie the presentation that I just gave to what we're hoping to achieve as part of the panel today. So how does the panel today relate to these reforms that we're suggesting? So we very often see that women are excluded from these important reform priorities and from the policy debate around economic reforms. And we are hoping to make a slight change of that. I have a very esteemed panel of all females. And the focus of today's panel will really be to discuss the respective areas of expertise of the panels, but most importantly also to take account of important gender issues that are of course woven throughout these reforms. And we can then think about, in the next steps, how better inclusion can be achieved. And with no further ado, I'm very happy to introduce my panelists, starting from the left, from my left, your right, Dr. Hadia Majid. She is Associate Professor and Chair of the Department of Economics at LUMS. Her research agenda considers the impact of monetary and public resource constraints on individuals in Pakistan, with a special focus on women's access to decent and empowered work. She's published in international journals and is currently editing a book titled Gender at Work in Pakistan. We very much look forward to that. She's received grants from several agencies and prestigious organizations and has acted as a consultant for numerous government and non-government agencies on gendered labor market outcomes. She's a Fulbright scholar, has a PhD from the Ohio State University and an MSc from the University of Warwick. Thank you for being here today with us. Then next to her, we have Dr. Sabia Khurram. She is a professor of administrative sciences and the director of Women Development Center at the University of the Punjab. She's also holding the international office at the same university. Her research interests include e-governance and tax reforms, social media research, and organizational and policy studies. She's extensively published. Please do look at her extensive record. And has won several research grants from local and foreign universities. Dr. Sabia has obtained her PhD from the University of Stirling in the UK and an MBA from IBA. Then we have, I'm very happy to have Dr. Hannah Mahmood. She's actually, she came in last minute to this panel because Dr. Sabah, who we initially had invited, fell ill. So thank you so much for being available at such short notice. She's currently working as a nutrition consultant with UNICEF. She has over a decade of experience in global health research and advocacy, and she began her journey, though, with a medical degree. After practicing pediatrics, she earned a master's degree in health informatics and a PhD in global health from the University of Edinburgh. And her primary focus or area of interest is on maternal and child health, particularly focused on nutrition, but also infectious diseases, mortality surveillance, mental health, and climate change. Last but not least, we have Fatima Atif. Fatima is currently pursuing her bachelor's degree in management science with a specialization in finance. And she has the desire to establish a microfinance institute aimed at poverty alleviation and financial independence for women. Fatima works as an event manager and social media manager, currently at a small independent publishing house. But among many other things, she's also a volunteer teacher at a school dedicated to empowering and underprivileged girls. Fatima is a bright young woman who is part of our Youth Voices outreach program that we've recently established, and we're very happy for you to be here. Without further ado, I will start the discussion. We have a format to where we are asking each of the panelists one question, and then we go into a second round. So maybe let me start with Fatima. Fatima, what are some of your lived experiences as a student? We've heard that it's very difficult for women to get into the public debate on economic reforms, and so we'd be very curious to hear from you what your experience has been. What constraints do you face as a young, ambitious woman to sort of access education, to go to university, and at university, what are some of the constraints you face?
Right. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Before I began talking about my lived experiences, I was very curious to learn that in the previous session, all the questions that were raised in the Q&A session were by men, right? So male students, male professors, other people. What I as a female student, feel like the confidence that we as female students have is really in the back of our heads, right? So जब आप बात कर रहे होते हैं कि अच्छा यार क्लास में पार्टिसिपेशन किसकी हो रही है, तो I feel like women as students are not as listened to as they should be. Their opinions are not taken into consideration, and that's where that self-confidence kind of starts to deteriorate, right? Maybe my, whatever I say in class is not valuable enough, or it's not correct, right? We focus a lot on what the right answer is. In life, there is no right or wrong answers, right? When we were even talking, when I went to the focus group discussion with the World Bank, so we had a really interesting thing that someone at the World Bank said, that a cricket team cannot win if half of your team is not playing in the field, right? जब आपकी जो औरतें हैं वो उनको ट्रांसपोर्ट का इतना इशू है, so let's not get into education even to begin with. Let's talk about all of the things that go back from education, right? Let's go back to getting out of your house, getting the transport. I also think about when we as friends try to plan out things, we're like, all right, let's go for a hangout. The major question is कि who will pick us, who will drop us, right? हमें लेगा कौन, हमें छोड़ेगा कौन? So हमारा भाई छोड़ेगा या हमारे हमारे बाबा छोड़ेंगे, and that is such a small thing in a big world. But then again, you think about the boys that get together, everyone has their own bikes, they all just come together and gather. For them, gathering is such an easy concept, and that camaraderie is so easy that they exchange ideas, right? They talk and they sit together and they're going to talk about ideas, they're going to talk about economic reforms and all of that stuff. But women don't even have a chance to, even gather. There are so many hurdles when you talk about even gathering up front, right? If you're not going to sit in groups, talk about, all right, what are the issues you face as a woman? What are the issues I face as a woman? And what can we do? So I have this thing, I think, and professors really do not try to maybe make that effort for girls and encouraging them, hey, your opinion matters, your voice matters. So I think transport is the biggest issue, and then when you get into an education sector, so I study in Punjab University, right, which is the largest public sector university in Pakistan. So you get a gist of what Pakistan is going to be like just looking at my university. And when you feel like how many, just looking around, how many female photographers are here today?
Future mothers. Thank you for the very important question, Christina. So before I actually start telling you about those challenges, for those of you who don't know what stunting is, it's low height for age, and it's about 40% in our children in Pakistan, which is a huge number when you compare it with the region around the world. And also, secondly, about 50% of the women of reproductive age in our country are anemic. So 50% of the women sitting here are anemic, even if you don't know that. So the basic problem here is that early childhood development is not given a key focus on when we talk about, children and young mothers. Early childhood development encompasses the time from birth to 8 years of age, and the first 2 years are the most critical. It's either make or break at that time. And when we talk about early childhood development, or ECD, the major challenges happen around 5 elements of the nurturing care framework. The first element is nutrition. Nutrition is a big issue here in Pakistan. Now, at one end, although we do have a limited, or you can say food insecurity element, but on the other hand, we also have inadequate dietary practices. And when we talk about gender, that is a major problem when it comes to girls and women. We all know that males are given preferences when it comes to diets and dietary practices. Then we have another element of health. Access to adequate health for young children, and especially young girls and women, is a big problem. Like Fatima mentioned, they're not able to go out of their household if they're ill without anybody accompanying them. They're not able to get transported to a healthcare facility alone. So these are key barriers which they face in order to access adequate healthcare, because of which their health is impacted. Then the third element of ECD nurturing care framework is responsive caregiving. This is our concept in Pakistan, is that caregiving is the responsibility of the mother of the house, whereas it should be the responsibility of both the mother as well as the father. A child is, a child is, as you can say, a property of both the mother and the father. So they both should be equally responsible for caregiving. And by that, I'm talking about loving and playing and, basic things that a child requires for early development. Then the next element comes about safety and security. That's another problem in our country. Women in our country are slightly insecure when it comes to comparing them with men. Like Fatma mentioned, it's not easy for them to gather together. It's not easy for them to go out whenever they want. So that hinders their capabilities of accessing opportunities for early learning, education, healthcare, etc. And the fifth element of nurturing care framework is early learning opportunities. Girls in our countries, and they have limited access to education as well. Although we have a system in Pakistan, even the government system of schools is very extensive, but the opportunities for girls is very limited in that. Girls tend to have education at primary level, but how many of them actually go to the secondary healthcare level, educational level? And I'm not just talking about the urban communities. We have to keep a focus on the fact that a major portion of our population lives in the rural communities. So they don't have access to education as well. So all of these elements tend to, kind of lead us to a vicious circle of poverty and economic deprivement. And so we are not able to contribute as women to the society as it should be. So I hope that answers the question, Christina.
Thank you very much. I now want to sort of spin it a bit farther in life. So we heard about challenges during childhood. We heard about challenges sort of in the education system. I'd now like to turn to Dr. Hadia and talk about challenges in the labor market. Your research very much focuses on this aspect. And so we see an incredibly low female labor force participation rate in Pakistan of 25%. So I just want to learn from you, what are some of the implications of that for women? And why is it so challenging for women to enter the workforce and access decent and empowering work?
Thank you, Christina. So what our panelists have already touched upon and talked about, जो education sector में उन्होंने बात की है, health के मुतालिक भी जो बातचीत हुई है, a lot of that gets reflected in the labor market as well. So if our human capital levels are low, which is what our first two panelists have really alluded to, that girls don't have access to education, children, and when you look at children, there's inequality in access to nutrition. That means that girls are at a disadvantage when it comes to the human capital levels. And the productivity of your labor force so crucially depends upon this. So right off the bat, you have girls with lower levels of education, girls with worse levels of health, so they're not going to be as productive, and everyone knows this. So the demand for their labor is going to be that much lower. Even when there is demand for their labor, the demand is going to be in lower productivity tasks. So where you do have women entering the labor market, you're not able to see them achieve that level of earning potential that you see for the boys. One way country, I keep hearing, I've been talking to some of my colleagues in the previous 2 days. In one of the sessions, a percentage of 20 to 30% increase in female civil servants in Pakistan was quoted, that the numbers have increased. Now, mind you, why I'm giving that example? Because in the Pakistani context, civil servants represents one of the most stable institutions who are very well represented as far as policy inception, policy discussions, policy making, policy implementation, policy evaluation is concerned. So it is they are very important stakeholders. If I go a little bit in Urdu here, I don't know, I've been, asking this question, I've asked this question to two of my very experienced colleagues in the past 2 days. हम में से कब किसी ने सुना है कि there is a chairperson PND in Punjab? मैंने तो नहीं सुना in my living memory. It's always the chairman PND, right? It has to be chairman FPR, not chairperson FPR. I don't know. I would like to be corrected here. All the chief secretaries in all the provinces would essentially be males. Do we have any secretary finances who are females? Why are women in these important positions? They are not occupying, even if not central, they're just positions where policies are essentially being made for women, right? I would also obviously talk about fiscal issues. Less than 1% of Pakistani population pay their taxes. 2.5 million actively filed taxes.
85% of them are males and 15% of them are females, if I talk about numbers. Why? One of my studies, we found out, one of our findings was that no matter how educated a female is, she would leave the legal and the financial matters to the males of the household. So 85% males as the tax filers and 15%, and I'm sure those 15% also are not filing themselves. I did another research on poverty, and we collected data from one of the very small villages in district Bhakkar. And since we were focusing on poverty, so we wanted to talk to the heads of the households in that village. There were houses where only females were working. They were the ones who were bringing the money to the house. But when we would want to talk to the heads of the households, it would always be the man. Even if they are not financially contributing to the funds in the house, symbolically, men are the heads of the households. So in the policy making sector, overall in the population also, due to the patriarchal rules, obviously roots which are obviously world over, international, but they're worse in Pakistan, and this is centuries old discrimination. And that's something which we say, obviously we see in the policy making sectors also.
Thank you very much. I'll actually leave it with you now. And so we have heard a lot about the challenges that you face in your everyday engagement. What are some of the things that we can do to change that? What is it really that not just as a woman, but what is it that everyone can contribute to this debate?
I think that's a good time that I can just whatever the debate I've generated, I can answer that quickly. I was just thinking of a two-pronged strategy. Number one, women in policy, the number of women in policy making has to be increased through reforms, and also we have to have more reforms specifically for women also. World Bank reforms for a brighter future. World Bank has come up with a very comprehensive set of sort of recommendations in very diverse areas such as fiscal, expenditures, how to improve the business environment, child stunting, so many different areas, very diverse areas. I would propose that we sort of evaluate all of these sets of recommendations or reform through a gender mainstreaming lens. How can these sets of reforms or recommendations can be skewed positively for the gender? And obviously, I would give some examples here. We do that, by the way. We can and we should do that for climate protection or environment protection, that whatever reforms we are coming up with, how it would affect the climate. And there are climate protection sort of mechanisms in place. We have to do that for gender also, even if that reform specifically...
Women, what do they need money for, right? So what are they going to spend it on, That is such a... So it angers me to the point I've been teaching girls in Hunza where they have these issues. They have done so much unpaid internships. They're thinking of switching careers because they're like, we don't get money because the other person is like, you're a girl, how much would you need? And then again, you're a student, how much would you need? So you do not get me, you shouldn't be paid on the basis of your, what you think I need, but on the basis of your skills. So I feel like skill development should be one thing, business incubator centers should be one thing, and then, in classrooms, encourage your girls to speak, encourage them to have opinions, encourage them to have the strongest opinions.
With that, I would like to hand it over to the audience. We look forward to your questions.
Instead of going ground up, especially in case of medical students, what would you like to do in terms of policy? And the other question is that we have 33% of our M&As as women, and what is their role in policy making, and what can they do to drive the women agenda?
Dr. Hari, could I maybe ask you to answer this?
Sure. So the medical doctor's question is something that labor economists in Pakistan have been grappling with for a while. And I think it comes back to the marriage market. So in India, we're seeing something similar. In India, what we're seeing is that the labor market force participation rates have actually started to go down for your higher educated women. And उधर यही हो रहा है कि you get a lot of return, so to speak, on your girls' education in the labor market. So Pakistan में anecdotally at least, what we are finding is that आपको डॉक्टर बहू चाहिए. जब डॉक्टर बहू आ जाएगी, so she'll help in the next generation's human capital. That's why you want her. But her agency in terms of being a part of the labor market, that is kept under wraps. So you want her there to take care of your household, you want her there to bring up your grandchildren as the parents of the son, but you don't want her to be a part of the labor market, or if you want her to be a part of the labor market, you want her number of hours reduced. Now, in terms of what the cost of this to the economy, that's huge because it's a big investment. If you think about our medical colleges, a lot of them you're subsidizing the education of these girls very highly, and then they're not going back into the labor market. Isme, I just want to add, what's been really interesting is the use of digital technology in closing this gap. So, Sehat Kahani, other institutes like that, other ventures like that, which are by the way women-led, have tried to fill the gaps that we just don't have enough doctors by taking all of these professionals that are sitting at home and out of the labor market and bringing them back into the labor market and filling the gaps in certain areas. I'll leave the policy question to another panelist.
I think one thing that I'd like to add here is that household level pay, it comes down to the support of the women to actually come in the forefront. You really raised a very important question. I agree कि बहू डॉक्टर चाहिए, पर बहू जो है ना वो काम नहीं कर सकती. She can't work. So supportive men, supportive brothers, supportive fathers, supportive husbands play a very important role when it comes to bringing the women in the forefront. So even if a woman wants to, she can't until she has a very good supportive. So I can see a lot of men here, your fathers, your brothers, your husbands. So how many of you are supportive? I'm sure a lot of you are, but not 100%. That's why women are not in the forefront. So at the policy level, yes, we do have 33% M&As. I do agree with that. But how many of them are, how many of them are actually given the opportunity to actually speak the way they want to? There's a lot of suppression at that. And I won't talk about the political aspect, I'm not a part of that. But I just wanted to highlight the fact that yes, the situation is not bleak. It's better than before. It's a lot better. Women are being given the opportunity. Like I mentioned, the government wants women to come in the forefront, but they're not actually there. And so we need to kind of, provide a conducive environment for them to come forward to. Thank you.
Yeah, Christina, if I can make a small comment to that. Yeah, जो doctors वाला आपका सवाल था, we often get that debate in the classrooms also, where the male students would, say कि हमारी university में अब demographic बहुत ज़्यादा change हो गए. 70% females, 30% boys. कई ऐसे प्रोग्राम हैं जिसमें 100% बच्चियाँ आ रही हैं पढ़ने के लिए. प्रॉब्लम ये नहीं है कि डॉक्टर, एंड देन आई ऑल्सो हैव हर्ड, इससे पहले न्यूज़पेपर्स में हम पढ़ते हैं कि जी कोटा सिस्टम कर दें, बच्चियाँ ज़्यादा मेरिट पे मेडिकल कॉलेज में आ जाती हैं, और क्योंकि वो परसू नहीं करती हैं तो उनसे वो अपॉर्चुनिटी ले ली जाए, उनका नंबर कम कर दें क्योंकि वो बाद में परसू नहीं करेंगी. दैट इज़ एब्सोल्युटली द रॉन्ग अप्रोच टू डील विद दैट प्रॉब्लम अगर पॉलिसी लेवल पे है, जैसे हमने बात की कि हाउस होल्ड के लेवल पे भी है, उसको फिक्स कर लें. देयर कैन बी अ लॉट ऑफ मल्टीपल वेज in which women can be facilitated to pursue a medical career while they are, taking care of their other responsibilities. The wrong way would be to take them opportunity. I just give an example. अच्छा कोई अगर मेल डॉक्टर बन जाता है और अगले दिन खुदा ना खास्ता एक्सीडेंट होकर मर जाए तो क्या we would say कि ये क्या हुआ? So if a female, decides to become a doctor and then they don't want to pursue that for, few years or whatever, that's their choice and we should not take that away from them. We don't pursue each and every career we start with, right? एंड सेकेंडली जो MNAs MPs वाला सवाल था, उसमें आप कोटा सिस्टम की जो बात करते हैं वो दैट इज़ इन रिस्पॉन्स टू रिवर्स डिस्क्रिमिनेशन, जो कि सेंचुरीज पुरानी है, एंड बिकॉज वी वांट वुमेन टू पार्टिसिपेट इन दैट तो हम उनको ले आते हैं. हमें कोशिश ये करनी चाहिए कि वुमेन अपने ओन पे कम्पीट करके असेंबलीज में आएँ. दे आर द वंस हु आर गोइंग टू पार्टिसिपेट. उसके लिए आप सिस्टम को कैसे फैसिलिटेट कर सकते हैं, उस पर बात होनी चाहिए, क्योंकि द वंस हु कम थ्रू द कोटा सिस्टम्स, यू ऑल नो द रियलिटी कि उनके फेमिलियल नेटवर्क्स हैं, फेमिलियल कनेक्शंस हैं, उसकी वजह से वो आते हैं, एंड देन ऑब्वियसली दे विल परस्यू द एजेंडाज ऑफ व्हाटएवर द मेल पावरफुल सर्कल्स के अंदर होंगे. सो इशू को हमें मेन स्ट्रीमिंग करनी है जेंडर की, और जेंडर मेन स्ट्रीमिंग आई वुड से वुड बी द आंसर टू बोथ ऑफ योर क्वेश्चंस. जी.
Okay, just gonna add to that a bit when you say कि अच्छा लड़कियों के marks ज़्यादा आते हैं, you know they.
And considering that if you can go to marketing, I believe that marketing is even more challenging for female. Finance is not that much, because if marketing means you have to sell something. Maybe you are traveling, you are on road or something like that. So I would not appreciate this decision that you just left your field on a retaliation. Just select what kind of aptitude you have, what kind of guts you have, what kind of potential you have. So these are the basic points which every female must consider, and her father, her mother, or her other family member, whatever they are, they must support their female so they can come forward. And my last question is to you, Ms. Christina, that these women have given you very useful tips, and I would request that if World Bank can contribute to education sector particularly, maybe they can give some schools to every province, like 1 or 2 schools in every province. They are model schools, something like that. And do not give fund to our government. We do not have trust to our government. This is bitter fact, bitter reality. But if we can get some schools or some university or some college, something like that, so we can say that this is World Bank has given this one. These kind of students are there. Female are given equal opportunity, and yes, and then of course after a few years we can get product from that university, colleges and schools, and they can contribute well in Pakistan's economy. If World Bank can do that, I would really appreciate and will salute you. Thank you.
Thank you. I was just informed that we are running short or out of time, so I would like to ask our panelists to address some of the comments as well as to make some final remarks if you would like, and then I'll wrap up.
All right, very quickly. आपने सवाल किया, आपने कहा कि जेंडर डिस्क्रिमिनेशन है कि नहीं है, एंड देन यू योरसेल्फ आंसर्ड इट कि है. अगर ये प्रॉब्लम ना होता तो हम इस सेशन में ही ना बैठे होते. वी वुड नॉट हैव बीन सिटिंग इन दिस सेशन, राइट? Then you spoke about आपने रोल मॉडल्स की बात की. You spoke about the female prime minister, Fatma Jinnah is the politician. I 100% agree. I think we need more role models in all the different areas, and that is what we've been talking about. कि हमें हर area के अंदर, और जिस तरह बात कर रहे थे that there are underprivileged females, I think they can be motivated and encouraged by that. That if they would see, whenever we see media, whenever we see important meetings, being done, do we see a lot of women sitting there and then secondly contributing meaningfully? I think that can be a change agent in itself. वो perception change करेगा, and it's going to bring more motivation to those. So I agree with you. Gender discrimination बहुत ज़्यादा है.
Okay, so I would want to add when you talk about Fatma Jinnah जब थी, तो when she was running elections, the campaign, the smear campaign that Ayub Khan ran against her, if you even study about it once, she was targeted in so many ways just for being a woman. I think that should be something that should be, something. And this is a very interesting thing when even when we talk about politics, when we're talking about that, women in politics are addressed with a certain sarcasm or a certain criticism. So you're going to call, so I'm not going to take names, but you're going to add BB to it, or you're going to add, oh, they don't know much. So even when you're addressing them, you're going to take certain criticism or certain sarcasm towards it. When you talk about our Prime Minister, we have had so many Prime Ministers, and out of one, we have a female Prime Minister. Your Prime Minister should not be, show-offy female वो नहीं होनी चाहिए कि आप कह दो कि अच्छा यार इसके अंदर हम लोग डाल देते हैं just for like a representation, right? Fake representation is not actual representation. So when you talk about Prime Ministers, how many Prime Ministers have been female? One is not enough. When you talk about there being a separate college for women, for MBBS, that again contributes to, so this is not a man versus woman debate, right? This is giving women opportunities, right? Equal playing field is not an equal playing field to begin with. Women should be encouraged. So it's equity versus equality again. And when you talk about separate college for women, again, it stems from that idea of hame chahiye, Dr. Bahu chahiye. If that notion is, suppressed, maybe women will actually start pursuing their own interests. Maybe they will become writers, photographers, gamers, all this sort of stuff that I think I would want to add. And lastly, about me choosing finance as an act of retaliation, I had my interest in both marketing and finance, but the reason I chose finance was because I wanted to prove women can be good with numbers too, and I hope that I'll be able to prove that one day. Thank you.
I'd just like to make one concluding comment here. We have a platform, we have opportunities, we have women in Pakistan, but unfortunately those women need support, and that support starts from the house, from the men of the house. So I'd really appreciate if that is catered to. Thank you.
I just echo that. I think we've talked a lot about role models, and I think it's important for us to recognize that role models सिर्फ लड़कियों के लिए नहीं होते हैं. It's not just important for our girls to see that women can occupy so many different roles. I think it's equally important for our boys and for our men to have these role models as well. I can't emphasize enough the importance of male allies in all of this. And just also that I think that the gender order is detrimental for everyone. We've talked about it from the context of women and how reproductive roles and this pressure to take a particular career because it makes you more manageable. There's pressure on men as well. There's pressure on men not to be a part of the reproductive work. And I think that's detrimental for everyone in society. It's also detrimental for our children in our society. So I'll just echo again that we really need male allies, and we really need to be getting out of this mindset that, oh, if there's a woman prime minister, she is a role model for all the little girls out there. She's a role model for all the little boys as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I will take that question on education, or the comment on education, to heart. Thank you very much. We do have education projects, of course. But needless to say, I think we all need to work together to further improve not only education for girls, but education for everyone. In terms of an elected female prime minister, this country is doing much better than my own, Austria. We've never had an elected female prime minister, so this is, I don't know what that feels like yet, and I'm hoping to see that very soon. But thank you very much for all of these ideas. We've heard a lot. We've heard about challenges for young women to gather, to exchange these ideas, which then leads into this whole aspect around them not feeling comfortable expressing ideas in the policy space. We've heard about the detrimental effects of stunting, of nutritional challenges for children and the outcomes it has later in life. We've heard about the labor market challenges that women face and the reasons for it. And we've heard a lot about what the challenges are to get engaged in this debate. Needless to say, there are a lot of challenges, but there's also hope. These 4 women on the panel give me tremendous hope. I'm very grateful for everyone to be here and have expressed their views so frankly. Also, thank you very much for the audience to give us the space and for Pied to allow us to put on this panel. I think we've all faced uphill battles throughout our careers. I'm afraid this is not going to go away, but it's definitely worth it. And I think Hannah said it very eloquently. We all have fathers, brothers, husbands that shape who we are, but the opposite is also true. What we do, what we achieve, and how we engage and interact also shapes the opinions of people around us. And I think this is an excellent opportunity to hopefully move forward and continue being part of this dialogue and debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.